Okie dokes. I might
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Joining the Dots, the Startups Network. I'm Carl, and today I've got a great fun privilege. I don't want to just say privilege. It's been a privilege knowing you, Alex, but it's also a fun privilege to have you on today. So this is Alex Moscow, everybody. Hi, Alex.
Hey, Carl. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, looking forward to it. We always have good conversations, so let's broadcast one of them and pick your brain. So just to give everybody a bit of background to, obviously, you've been part of this network and have a very particular background that not a lot of people actually have, which is really around communication and PR and actually fascinating as well that you've got that background track record of working with very large corporates, big brands. I know Samsung is one. You could tell us about a few more maybe, and but also understanding the issues that startups face and how to actually get them to communicate, find the right sort of customers. And so do you want to just give us a bit more of your story, basically, to start off?
Sure, happy to. So, as you say, I'm corporate communications specialist. I've been in the industry for about 20 years now, coming up to, not quite, but coming up to. And I started out in B2B public relations. And I was always the chap who was partnered up with the CEOs of our client businesses. And my job was to build their media profiles. And what that typically meant was sitting down with them and auditing their brain, if you like, right? Finding out what they knew that we felt we could then package up and sell to the media and use to generate interviews and opinion pieces and that kind of thing. And actually, I hate to say it, to be fair, it's actually quite straightforward. When my clients were very large technology companies. And when you phone up the FT all the time, do you say, would you like to have lunch with the CEO of Samsung or Toshiba or Lycos at the time? Typically they'll say yes, because they want to speak to the heads of industry, and these companies typically are, right? So as long as you've got something of interest to say, then they'll meet with you. It was much harder with let's say less well-known brands, right? With smaller companies, growing companies that were doing things in the industry, but perhaps didn't have the brand weight of the really big players. But what I found was that everybody had really very valuable information that they knew, that they picked up during their careers, and as long as we understood what the audience was looking for, and we asked good questions, then we could find interesting information, package that up, and the media would be interested in covering it. So was very successful in generating a lot of coverage for my clients. But I realized, I think that the thing that I really realized, the main lesson that I learned was that when you're building communications, you don't start with the company, because people are typically, your buyer isn't typically interested in the company. They're interested in themselves and what it's going to mean for them, what they're going to get out of it. So when you understand people, then you can build content architecture that's going to be really of interest to them. And that's the thing, right? You demonstrate value and people are going to follow you. And so that's been kind of the underlying principle that's driven all of my work as I've gone through my career. And it's very much an evolution of that we do today. And we do work with startups. We recently did a workshop with London and Partners for their cohort on their business growth, on the London Mayor's Business Growth Network. So yeah, so lots of different kinds of companies, but the principle is the same. Understand your audience first, and then work out what that's of value, and then communicate that, and you will generate engagement.
Yeah, interesting. I think really that's a great starting point, and it just makes me just want to go into another level of detail, really, about what do you find fascinating when you sit down with startups and when you're guiding them. I think we all find this is that, just like you said, I love the phrase brain audit as well. We sort of, I think everybody out there probably, we have certain things that we meet again and again and again. So you're in that great position of, helping startups to think about that particular piece. So what are some of the things that come up again and again, either from their side or your side, where you just, you handhold them through that process?
Well, I think what's interesting is that, and this may be a British thing, more, and maybe a European thing more than, you know, and it will differ depending which country you're in. But as Brits, we tend to deny our value, right? So we underplay it. Okay, and so typically what you find is, and all businesses are guilty of this, not just startups. But when we're constructing our kind of our communication framework, whether it's our website, our, you know, our key messages, all that kind of stuff, we tend to focus on the what of what we do, the products, the services, the features, the benefits. And the problem with that is, A, it's not differentiating, and B, it kind of leaves all that incredible value that you've built over your career. And typically when you think about people who start up a business, entrepreneurs, it's because they're passionate about something, right? They're going into it because they believe that they can truly make a difference in people's lives and in the way that their service or product is given to the market. And typically they've come to that because they've got all of this experience behind them, all these lessons that they've learned. And what that means is they've been able to create something that's got a very fine edge to it, right? Which really cuts through. And they have such belief in it that they start a business around it. They have this passion, they want to help people. But when they actually come to their communications, all of that stuff gets left behind. And I think part of it is because there's modesty. We don't feel that we should be talking about ourselves, about where we've come from, about what we've achieved, about the lessons we've learned, and all of that valuable information and insight that we've generated that's actually created this approach. So when I'm speaking to my clients, that's the stuff. When we talk about auditing brains, that's the stuff we're looking at. I'm asking them, what are the lessons you've learned? What are the experiences you've had? How is it? What's the principles that are underlying everything that you do? Because that's the stuff that people are going to be interested in. You know, because that's kind of the personal stuff. It's the emotional stuff. It's the stuff that people are going to be able to see themselves in.
There's an art to it, isn't it, as well? Like, let's keep going, because I think a couple of things come to my mind. I mean, obviously, I love the whole thing about passion and how do we get, you know, because there is obviously a nice thing about humility, but there's also this thing about, and I think, like you're saying, you're obviously teasing out how do we communicate our passion. I know we've talked in the past about storytelling, and you're describing that effectively, isn't it? It's like, okay, let me explain, you know, I worked with this company and this is what happened, or I worked with this type of problem and this is how we solved it, etc. And so, and I think then this is really what we're doing actually in these videos. You know, I'm getting people to talk about their day to day and what they love doing. And, you know, I always get the passion from you, and when you've just done it in terms of articulating these ways that you actually help people, is, you know, you can feel the energy sort of building. So we'll keep building the energy for everybody out there. But you know, like I think one of the things I'm curious, actually, I'm going to be honest, because this is a question that sort of came to my mind, and maybe we can. There's almost two questions I've got, but one is around different styles. You know, like because we are talking about getting that balance right. One of the things I've been coming up across recently is, you know, we're dealing with a lot of technology startups these days, and let's just be, you know, blunt about some of the technology startups are led by people who are very technical. And I know for myself, you know, having gone through different ways of evolving, there can be, you know, maybe someone doesn't want to be passionate in the way that someone might want to be passionate. Maybe there's different ways of doing passion or different ways of telling one's story. Have you got any comments on that in terms of the different sort of personality types that you've met and how these things apply to the different types?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a really important point, you know, really important question that you've raised there. And I think, you know, this comes back to, and I think this is part of the issue. I don't think I mentioned, I'm a mentor on the London and Partners program, and I recently did a workshop, and the workshop is around building a persona for your business, or a customer persona. And what's interesting is, you know, there's probably about 40 business owners in this particular workshop. And, you know, as a marketer, I kind of think this is obvious, right? That they must have done this work. And I remember when I was first talking to the people who run the course, the cohort, and they were saying, you've got to do this piece of work with them, because for so few of them will have done this kind of customer piece. And it was really interesting because I give them questions they should be asking themselves, and then I talk to them at the end about what they got out of the session. And it's amazing how many people say, this is amazing, we've never done this, we've never really thought through who it is that we're selling to. We're obviously very passionate about what we've got, and we think that that's enough to sell it. But of course, you've got to think clearly about who it is that you're selling to. And it's not just the demographic type factors that you're looking for. It is that kind of psychographic stuff as well. It's really important to understand the personalities of the people that you want to attract, kind of their motivations, what their challenges are, and all of this context that they find themselves in. And it was interesting, I was doing another a podcast recently with some really interesting chaps who understand psychology really well. And there's only these personality archetypes, and typically every business will have a dominant personality archetype that they attract. And so you really need to understand that, because that's going to really kind of drive how you communicate, the tone that you use, the language that you use. I mean, you talked about, humility, and humility is important. But I would also say, there is a difference between arrogance and confidence, right? Arrogance is typically quite off-putting in any scenario, but confidence is very, very important. And that confidence typically comes from really understanding who it is that you're communicating with, the way in which they like to be communicated to, the kind of language that really connects them, that's in their world, that they understand, if you're a technical person, you're selling to a very technical audience, then you have a common language. But if you're not, then you need people who understand the context and the language of the people that you are communicating with. I think what's interesting also is that I've been doing I do a lot of case study work, right, which is typically going into my clients and asking questions and getting that, getting the level of insight, getting their perspective. And typically what I find is that I like to call it frequency. So the clients are typically humming on the same frequency as my clients, right? So it doesn't surprise me that they get on, right? They obviously tick a lot of boxes. They've got the experience, they get the results, they know how to solve the problem. But the clients themselves, the personality, the drive, the passion, the confidence, they're on an even keel, and that's what attracts people. It is that the way you hum on that frequency. So in answer to your question, it's quite a long-winded answer, but yes, you've got to really understand who it is that you are attracting, and also who you're going to attract, because sometimes it has a lot to do with the personality. In fact, it probably has everything to do with the personality, the culture, the value system of your business, and that's what people are going to engage with. So you've got to be very, very clear on who it is that you're engaging with. Absolutely. So be very clear on your customer profile from lots of different angles.
Yeah, totally resonate with that. Totally humming frequency with that as well, because I'm really witnessing it within Joining the Dots, because I've been niching saying, okay, data, AI, fintech, blockchain, nature tech, but they're mission driven and they're pioneering. And when a pioneer meets another pioneer, it's just like a spark festival. They love getting into that mode, and then they're smart people, so you get those collaborations that just naturally unfold through conversation. Like you said earlier on, we're just people, and obviously communication, as I've learned in life, is probably the most difficult and challenging and rewarding and important thing that we do as humans, right? How do we connect, and how do we work out if we're going to do some sort of exchange, if we're going to get support or hang out, and all these things. And obviously in business, it's as critical as it is in family, if not more for the circumstances of this video anyway. We're startups, we want money and customers, don't care about the rest, right?
Well, as they say, you can't pick your family, can you? But you can certainly pick your customers, right?
Yeah, and actually, isn't that interesting? Because I think what we're doing as well with these ecosystems being developed, as everybody kind of uses that word now, it is actually defining tribes or families. Like we're getting these clusters. So totally what you're saying about the humming and frequency. I think you're obviously talking about what we're putting out, and how that then magnetizes and attracts kind of people of the same sort of hum. and then there's that ease and actual flow that can happen from that, rather than trying to force something. And obviously, a lot of people, I mean, I've done sales for so long, and there's always that thing that sometimes, you know, gets put in front of startups, like, you can walk away from this bit of business despite how much it's worth, because do you know how much energy you're going to lose by doing that job? And actually it's going to kill you because you don't even have enough people, or whatever, so,
Right.
so that even when we're working, on proposals and beyond, I think it's the same applies in humming frequency, and obviously we have that issue. I mean, you've got that nice bridge between corporates and startups, where they typically hum at different frequencies, because startups like to go fast, corporates like to be cautious and protect their competitive advantage or whatever. So there's so many, like you said, there's so many different factors in this.
Well, I think one thing I will say, just to kind of finish that off, is to say, people know the saying that people buy people, right? But actually, there's a follow-up, which is people buy people, but they buy people like them. So one thing that I would say is, if startups can obviously sell to corporates and do so successfully, but what I would say is this: you've got to be very aware of who you're selling to, and if you're the entrepreneur, but you're not the right fit for the people that you're selling to, then you've got to find somebody in your organization that is, and they should be there, because they, as we say, they do need to hum on the right frequency. So really getting to grips with the kind of people that you're selling to, and really understanding who you sell well to, is absolutely paramount.
Yeah, this is really the kind of foundation layers, isn't it? When you can actually spend a bit of time on that, once you get it and you got a groove going, then actually it's a lifetime of value there.
Yeah.
One thing that you mentioned earlier, which I'm just going to pick up on a bit, you used the word differentiation, and it was when you were talking about passion. And just tell me a little bit more about, how you think, because obviously that is something that, when I help startups find investors and stuff like that, the investors are ruthless about, what's your USP, and, how do I make sure that someone can't come along and just replicate what you're doing? Just give us a bit of a sense from your world and your kind of vision. Where do you think I've traditionally used the word USP? Where do you think that fits for the startups?
Okay, so I think it's an interesting phrase, USP. This idea of a unique selling point, right? And I think it gets confused with differentiation, right? Because uniqueness means that it's something that you own and potentially nobody else owns, right? And I think differentiation can be a bit of a blind alley, right? Because it's difficult to do, right? And typically even the largest and most innovative companies struggle with differentiation. And actually they find different ways to do it. And I think this is the point, right? So when people think about differentiation, they typically think about the features of their service or product, right? And what can we do to be different, right? And as I say, that is a very difficult thing to do. And I would actually say that that's not what investors buy. I mean, they clearly want some sort of something that stands out, without a doubt, right? They want something that they can believe in. And actually what they're buying typically, as we know, are the people running the business. So even if the idea itself isn't of that in much interest to them, they sometimes will buy the people because they think, I really like you and I think we can do something together. What they will also buy is the narrative, right? So they, and I think this is the thing, right? With a lot of startups, they start from the position of how do we be different? And I think that's a blind alley. But they also they try to sorry, I've just lost my train of thought. So
to be different, the startups at the investor level, they start with how to be different.
Yeah, so so they try and, so I think the challenge with startups is that they're always trying to sell their thing, right? And actually what the investor is looking for is, what is the problem you are trying to solve, and how much is that problem worth? Are you the right people to solve it? And is the narrative, is the story you're telling going to resonate in the market? That's the other thing. So what they're all thinking about in terms of communication is, what's that one line? So we need something to differentiate, and then what's that one line that we can say, that USP, and in like 4 words, that we can say that's going to smash it, that's going to bang it out the park, that people are going to hear that and they're just going to think, I must have that, right? And and I think the challenge is that that's almost impossible to do, right? So it's never one. It's kind of there's never this one line to rule them all. It is always a narrative, right? So the narrative is, this is the context of the people that we want to help. This is the problem that they have. This is how it's being solved at the moment. And this is how we're going to solve it. And we're going to do that because we've got all of this experience and expertise. And here's the team that's going to do it. And we've noticed that this is a problem that's not being solved properly. And we've created this ecosystem that's just going to smash it. It's going to, everybody else is going to fall aside, and we will become the dominant force in that market. And I think that's a much more interesting USP, because that's unique to them. The narrative is unique, the people in the business are unique, the way that they're solving the problem potentially is unique, although it doesn't have to be. So when I think about unique selling point, I'm always thinking about a unique selling narrative rather than one point of, say, uniqueness or differentiation.
Awesome. Yeah, really, really interesting. I'm gonna steal that from you. Unique selling narrative. Very interesting. Okay, Alex, it's been an absolute pleasure. What's one? I mean, that almost is the. I was going to say, what's the one thing you want people to take away? I think that's a really nice point, actually, to just leave people with. So unless you want to throw something extra on top of that as a bit of a extra sauce, I'll leave that. Any extra comment on that?
Yeah. So I would say that if there's one thing that I would want to leave people with, it's this, right? Don't think about what you want to be, how you're different. Think about what you want to be known for, right? Because no matter what industry you're going into, you're typically going to a very competitive field, right? So I like to think about it in terms of, you think about a galaxy of stars, right? Looking up into the night sky, it's very difficult to, no one star stands out except for the brightest stars, which kind of shine down, right? You can pick them out of the night sky, right? And the companies, the brightest companies are those that have reputation, that are known for something specific. They are the go-to people for that one thing, and everybody goes to them for it, right? And that's what people need to focus on. It's not what makes you different, it's what do you want to be known for, and how do you show credibility in that thing, so people are magnetized, as you said earlier, to you for that thing.
Brilliant. Okay, so I mean, we'll put links to people finding you on LinkedIn and your website underneath the description, but do you want to just verbalize it as well now, just for them to easily note it down if people want to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I think probably the best place to have a look for me is on findyoursalessweetspot.com, where we all of this stuff, we talk about all this stuff, and there's some free guides that people can download around persona work, around telling stories, and generally get a feel for how they find their sweet spot.
Awesome. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure, Alex, and yeah, let's keep the dialogue going, and to be continued, right?
Thanks, Carl. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Cheers. See you then.